Bill Kerrigan. I'm a consultant. I primarily do work with AIAG, the Automotive Industry Action Group, based out of Southfield, Michigan. Discipline I kind of grew up in is finished vehicle logistics, and that's what I concentrate in. It's great to be back in Mexico. I haven't been down here in a long time, and I really miss coming here. The people are so nice. They make you feel welcome all the time. The ports have their own identity down here. It's a great place to work and a great place to be. I want to thank Louis and Karen and Chris and the entire Ultimedia team for including us in this panel today. We got a lot of good things to talk about. We have a great panel of experts here to share their thoughts and feelings about finished vehicle network design and implementation in Mexico. We've got a couple OEMs and a couple Tier 1 logistics suppliers. Again, the panel is going to be talking about vehicle logistics design and implementation in Mexico as we go from the levels we are now to what they say will be in 2-3 years, 5 million produced, and about 60–70% of that going back to the States, whether it be through rail or ocean or truck or a combination of all three. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce the first panelist, Scott Mize from Nissan, and he's got a few slides. Each of these panelists has a few slides they're going to go through, and then hopefully we're going to have a lot of questions and answers for them. So, Scott.
Buenos dias. It's the only Spanish I know except gracias, which is thank you. So again, let me introduce myself, Scott Mize, manager of outbound vehicle logistics for the Renault Nissan purchasing organization. And I have responsibilities of Canada, US, and Mexico. And I would like to thank Louis and his staff for this opportunity to invite me to speak here at this first Mexico Vehicle Logistics Conference. And also thanks to Bill Kerrigan for moderating the portion of the conference, and also look forward to our other speakers and their presentations. The Renault Nissan Purchasing Organization group works closely with our Renault Nissan supply chain members throughout North America for the commercial agreements with all the Renault Nissan suppliers. And later today, you'll have the chance to hear from Chris Stiles. He's Nissan's Senior Director of Supply Chain, and he'll discuss the future of automotive logistics in Mexico. My presentation will be more of a macro view of vehicle logistics, defining a network. So, network. Sorry. Network is defined as all the pieces of the puzzle to move a product from an origin to a final destination. This is both the physical movement of the product and the systematic movement of the product, and of course all the details that go behind this. We must consider two different views of the network, the OEM and the supplier. These views are really based on your perspective. As an OEM, we are considering the full supply chain. As a supplier, you may be just considering your section of the supply chain. So a few questions to think about as we move through my presentation. What does the OEM consider when thinking of a vehicle logistics network? What does the supplier consider when thinking of a vehicle logistics network? So let's explore that question. What does the OEM consider when thinking of a vehicle logistics network? The network or supply chain is deceptively simplistic, but when we break apart the pieces, the puzzle has a lot of complexity, as we all know, and it becomes more apparent. With manufacturing plants throughout North America, we utilize rail carriers, haul-away carriers, vessel carriers, ports, processors, and many other supply chain partners. In any industry, the network is viewed as an important dimension in competitive strategy. As we all know, though, the network is extremely complex, with complexities such as system integrations and multiple suppliers within a network, networks across multiple countries with different levels of development and different market and economic conditions. The defining of the network takes place at the level of total cost minimization. The network must be adaptable, must be reliable, it must offer low damage frequency and low cost. The industry must deliver on the goal of total cost minimization when we're designing a network. I want to repeat the last point. The industry must deliver on the goal of the total cost minimization. We also must support getting the right product to the right market in the least amount of time. Our networks need to support this, which is a Nissan core value. The network needs to be adaptable. It also needs to be reliable. With ever-changing conditions, both internal and external influences. And again, we must support getting the right product to the right market in the least amount of time. I shouldn't have stapled this together. It's very hard to work with here. Learn that next time. So, last question here. What can a supplier do when the OEM is designing a network? Consider the network and how you, as a supplier, fit into that network. You're really the subject matter experts, so we look to you to offer solutions to us. And finally, deliver results on your commitments, which will ensure low cost, low damage frequency, adaptable, and a dependable network, which will ultimately satisfy our end customers. So I'd like to thank, again, Louis and his staff for allowing me to take a few moments and express my views here. I also would like to close with one final thought, and that thought is, there is no more neutrality in the world. You either have to be part of the solution or you're going to be part of the problem. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate that. I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit about it, the OEMs as we get into the Q&A, and just from my own point of view, sometimes I wonder if the OEMs think about where they build plants, if they would ask us, the suppliers, before they build the plant sometimes, but that's for discussion for another day. Next up is Alfonso Rodriguez from General Motors, and he's going to speak to General Motors design. Thanks.
All right, well, hello everybody. Good morning. My name is Alfonso Rodriguez. I'll be walking through how General Motors designs our own networks. Pretty much, I'm not going to go over the same information though. I'm just going to show you what the network looks like. That's part of the presentation. So first off, I'd like to thank Louis and the team here for this conference. I think it's really important for us here in GM Mexico, for whomever operates the networks here in Mexico, or logistics, to have these kind of conferences for everybody's learning purpose. So appreciate that opportunity. Here's the agenda. First, I'm going to look at a competitive landscape of General Motors and everybody else that is competing in this market in Mexico. Then, very quickly, a Mexico overview. I'm not going to bore you with that because yesterday my colleague Luis Sandoval walked you through the competitive landscape, or the Mexico overview in more detail. Then I'll go through the Mexico finished vehicle logistics flows, show you some maps and give you some data about our flows. Then I'll go through future growth and what keeps us up at night in General Motors. So with that, let's begin. And by the way, I'll do this in English because two colleagues this morning tried, they made an effort and changed their native languages to speak Spanish. So I'm going to do the same thing for you guys. Hope you appreciate it. So back in the 90s, there were only 5 brands competing here for the whole market in Mexico, shown there. As the market evolved and we all heard from how the Mexico NAFTA trade agreements have opened investment in Mexico, there were eventually 22 brands in 2000, and then last year we had 36 brands competing for the same market. Unfortunately, there's no more, the industry in Mexico has no growth to the point where everybody can keep the same share that they had back in the 90s. So all of us that we had the privilege to be offering our vehicles back in the 90s have to deal with very heavy competition with our obviously great competitors here in Mexico. This is what it looks like in what the Mexico industry looked like for 2014. We don't like to be second, but that's where we are. But we think that our share is there because VW was closing in some of the quarters, and they're a great competition to us as well. And the reason that I bring this information to you is because for us is critical to have the vehicles at the right time on the right dealers for all our customers to actually, whenever they go to a dealership, be able to actually buy the vehicle that they want. With a heavy competition that I showed you before, if we don't have the right vehicle, our customer may have 2 or 3 other options across the corner where they can go buy their car. So I feel that my job is really important. I know all of us think the same thing, right? Like Nissan just mentioned, the network must work like clockwork. So we offer in Mexico 32 nameplates, plus all available options of those nameplates. So you can imagine the amount of complexity that we have and our VSSM group has to actually decide which vehicles need to be where, and it's our responsibility to move them there. Whoops, before I go any further, I'd like to first thank Nissan for introducing what vehicle logistics is and the importance of network, and I think we're all working towards the same goal. And I'll explain a little bit about the GM vehicle flows in a second. First, I would like to say GM Mexico, we have 2 distribution centers, and we have one plant that actually acts a little bit like a distribution center. In 2014, most of the vehicles we sold in Mexico are produced in Mexico, but 40% are imports. We import those vehicles from US, Canada, and overseas countries. Mostly 30% ocean, so our most imports are from Korea, and 10% by rail, and that's US and Canada. Out of the production in Mexico, so the other way around for exports now, all of our production, we exported 81% of our vehicles produced here locally to any other country elsewhere in the world. And 19% of that, of course, is sold in Mexico. So now I'll walk you through how we design our network and how it's currently operating. First, I'll start with the ocean imports. Like I said, we have 2 VDCs, and they're pointed there on the map, one in the northern part of the country and one in the center part of the country. These 2 VDCs serve as a focal point to actually bring all the imports there and distribute from those points, and I'll go through the local distribution in further slides. Just to point out, we import vehicles from Korea and Thailand, out of Lázaro Cárdenas, and Brazil from Veracruz. Around 28% of those vehicles come from Asia, 2% from Brazil. Those are the nameplates that we bring from those countries. So we have Buick products and we have Chevrolet products. Our rail imports from US and Canada, we bring most of our products, or most of the nameplates from US and Canada. premium vehicles, the most expensive vehicles. So it's critical, obviously, when we talk about quality of transportation, that integrity in transportation is maintained. We rail those products down to our VDCs. Now talking about domestic production, plant to our VDCs. We produce in 3 plants. All 3 plants produce vehicles for the Mexico market. We have Ramos producing the Cadillac SRX, the Captiva, Chevrolet Captiva, and the Chevrolet Sonic. SLP, we have the Aveo and the Trax. And Silao, we have the full-size trucks, Cheyenne, Silverado, and GMC Sierra. So all these products, when produced, are shipped to the VDCs as well. And now the last part of the network, right? Once we have the vehicles at the VDCs, ship them to our 164 dealerships around the country. Most of the shipments, of course, happen in the southern part of Mexico, given the fact that that's where our customers mostly buy our vehicles. 20% in Ramos, 74% in Querétaro, and around 5% from Silao. And this is the small portion that I talked to you about, that we actually, because of cost, we decided the best option would be to ship directly from the plant versus using one of our VDCs. These vehicles are large and heavy, so it was a business decision to do it that way. Our rail exports, this is our, obviously, as you guys heard, is the biggest production of Mexico goes to the US and Canada, of course. So 67% of the vehicles produced in Mexico go to the US and Canada for GM. Out of the 3 plants, all plants produce vehicles for those markets. We use 3 border points crossings here for shipping those products. In terms of ocean export, we not only ship ocean to overseas countries, deep sea, we also ship short sea to the US. But it's the 16% remaining of the exports that use this mode of transportation. We also ship a very small portion to Caribbean and Central America, around 1% of our total exports out of Mexico. And then I'll head to a different subject, which I think was touched in several of the presentations in the past by many people here, is Mexico growth. And yesterday we mentioned that GM has invested $1.4 billion in the last 2 years, and there's $3.6 billion coming in the next few years for a total of $5 billion. This is the amount of growth that GM has in Mexico and the importance that the corporation sees in this country. We're generating 5,600 jobs, and obviously we're also investing in production of powertrain and engines. With this is just the starting point of my next 2 slides, which is going to show the 58% growth that we see here in Mexico, and why we're kind of nervous of the velocity that this is going to happen at, especially with a few of people that talked about yesterday with the growth of infrastructure in Mexico and not happening quickly enough. So I'll talk about what keeps us up at night in General Motors in terms of our main goal, which is keeping our customers satisfied. First off, I'll talk about rail a little bit. It's capacity. We have shortages of rail cars, of empty rail cars, to ship our products to US and Canada. And sometimes we have lack of crew and power to meet the demand. So this is one of the concerns. Then velocity. With lack of velocity, we have increased, obviously, transit times for our customers, but also increase in risk to get our vehicles damaged in transit or vandalized. So that points to the third point, which is theft and vandalism. This is a problem that is industry-wide, and we all have to deal with it when rail transportation. But rail transportation offers obviously great benefits that counteract with the theft and vandalism. So the next point is haul-away. There are not too many haul-away suppliers here in Mexico. Right now, the number of haul-away suppliers and the capacity is appropriate for the market. But this is a concern that we have since it's going to increase significantly for the next 3 to 4 years. The infrastructure, border crossing congestion, and the Mexico roads, which was brought up also yesterday and in some of the forums. And lastly, ports, capacity, rail spurs, yard, berths, and Veracruz port. I mentioned yesterday in the questions and answers to the Veracruz person that was here. The weather conditions to us are a risk that we had taken in the past, and we need to evaluate industry-wide what measures we can take together to fight this weather condition situation. And with that, first off, I'd like to thank everybody of you, and especially our current customers and all you potential customers of General Motors. Thank you.
Thank you, Alfonso. I'm sure we're going to have some more questions as we go forward, but capacity, capacity, capacity is what I keep on hearing. So next up is Roberto Zavala. He's head of Mexico for Wallenius Wilhelmsen Logistics.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone, and thanks to the staff for Automotive Logistics for the invitation and having me here speaking in this great panel. Well, you'll hear more about capacity from me, so sorry about that. We can't hear enough, right? First of all, just like to say this is not a commercial presentation. This is not a sales pitch. This is really the message that we're trying to convey is a sense of urgency, because we're worried, just as Alfonso mentioned correctly. Yes, the government has been very successful in attracting those great investments, but we haven't really seen an infrastructure development plan to match those investments and to be able to cope with the increased demand that's going to be added to the logistics networks in Mexico. So first I'm going to talk about in general what we believe are the things that an OEM needs to consider when developing logistics networks, and then I'll go about specifically to Mexico. First of all, and might seem a little simple, but taking a strategic approach and clarifying a logistics strategy is crucial for an OEM. So I'll come back to that one on the next slide. Once you clarify your strategy, you're in a good position to choose the right partner, and then, of course, focusing on the partnership will always deliver the most value, right? They're business-driven relationships. They have higher focus on specialization. They have the ability to share risks. And finally, once you have that together, we just actively manage the relationship and handle the contract as a shared experience. So some of the key priorities to shape your logistics strategy: first, defining where are you today? What's your logistics strategy today? How big is your logistics department? Is it dynamic? Is it more passive? Are you looking for something more dynamic? Then how many points of contact do you want to manage? So depending on the size of the logistics department will depend how many points of contact you want to manage, right? So whether you have a big logistics department or small, there'll be different options from the supplier side to cover your needs. You want to make sure they're ready to cover your needs. Do you want to own your logistics technology? So this is a very important point, because your logistics systems, you can transfer those fixed costs to a variable cost per unit. That's true, but of course you can create a connection to a supplier that's not going to be so easy to break in the future. So a good thing to consider, depending again on your logistics strategy. How much logistics competency you wish to maintain. Just as with technology, the more you leverage competence on a supplier, you can take away those costs from your structure, but again, you erode your logistics competence. So where's the middle ground? Where's the point where you're going to be? Once you define those questions, you'll be in a position, we believe, I mean, it's more complex than this, but once you have answers for those, you'll be able to define what's your future logistics strategy, and then what's the best supplier for you. We've seen when it comes to insourcing, outsourcing, logistics strategies move along this continuum here, where from 2PL to a 5PL, right? So where on a 2PL scheme, basically all the strategies within your companies, and only the execution is taken care of by suppliers, where truck companies, car carriers, and so on. What we've seen in Mexico, for instance, depending on the size of the companies, long-established, high-volume companies with a big market share tend to gravitate towards here, somewhere between 2PL or 3PL, having the execution done by by external suppliers and some of the coordination planning. And we've also seen, small volume brands, imports into Mexico with no production in the country, maybe somewhere here with some of the or all of the planning and some of the logistics strategy handled by different suppliers. I'm going to move on now to the case of Mexico in particular. So I guess the first thing I want to say is that it's complex. That nothing seems to be seamless when doing logistics in Mexico. And because, apart from selecting the right suppliers, you need to deal with infrastructure issues, rail equipment supply issues, security concerns, difficulties to integrate logistics suppliers. So the more suppliers that you have, the more difficult to integrate them, especially from a systems perspective, where really and when I say we I include ourselves, because we need to get better at giving you visibility throughout the distribution chain. So far, it's very manual, and the providers are just not integrated. They're not where they should be. If you look at guys like, the main freight forwarding companies, they do have that ability, and I think on the finished vehicle logistics, we're not there yet. Finally, when you do logistics in Mexico, you need a strong plan B, always. And the plan B that we normally see is, related to those issues, especially railcar equipment supply, is trucks and short sea. And I'll come back to short sea a little later. Basically, and again, back to what I said in the beginning, we want to really create a sense of urgency, right? The future is now. The port infrastructure and the rail supply are already at capacity. We saw a few examples in the end of last year where the OEMs, they were in need to use trucks, for instance, on rail corridors. That they've been rail corridors by excellence. So they've been forced, basically, to use trucks because of the railcar capacity. What this creates is also truck shortages for the domestic market, which, as you know, is mainly served by trucks. This also, congestion on ports and railcar supply issues also made the dwell times at the ports longer, creating some damages to the units. Then investment required or planned at port terminals are still pending. We heard yesterday from Alejandro how do they expect their investments in Veracruz. But still, for instance, in Mexico, there's no specialized terminal for handling, or a specialist Ro-Ro terminal for handling finished vehicles. There's always been investment plans, but we just don't see them materializing at the right time, at the time or the speed that the growth in the industry is going to need. Finally, for this slide, there's 1 million plus more vehicles are going to be added to the system in the next 5 years. Just making a rough calculation, if we consider that 60% of those are going to go to the US by rail, and if we consider a 20-day cycle time, between the time you load and then you get the rail car back, that means around 2,000 rail cars in addition to what we currently have in Mexico. So the question is that really going to happen? Is there a real plan to build those rail cars to serve the logistics needs? And then moving a little towards the short sea possibilities. Basically, short sea works differently in North America than in other places in Europe. Basically, here what you can see, this example here shows a short sea service in Europe. Big ports, big volumes, transit time is measured in hours, and we have purpose-built short sea vessels. 1,000 to 4,000 RTs, car equivalent units, and whereas, in North America, the way we normally work, or the way carriers work, is you have round-the-world vessels or big vessels, deep-sea trade vessels, serving the main trades in the world. And then to do short sea, I quote short sea in North America, you add ports to the rotation of those vessels. So those are big vessels, from 5,000 even to 8,000 RTs. So transit times in days, not in hours. Volumes are not as big as here. So just to give you an example, it works differently. I guess the question here is, are the OEMs, for instance, committed to commit volumes, like a percentage of volume, so as a more effective, more regular, competitive short sea service can be provided. And this is my last slide. So the light at the end of the tunnel. Short sea, for us, needs to be more than an emergency plan, right? Today, short sea is still the emergency cord that you pull when rail cars disappear. And it needs to be more than that. As ocean carriers, we need a critical mass to be able to convert this in something more regular, more standard. Create collaborative forums to address the security concerns. This is real. Increased vandalism, theft, keys, and so on. During yesterday's speech from Mr. Secretary, he talked about 2 Mexicos. That's absolutely right, and as long as there's 2 Mexicos, this problem will continue to be the case. There's only so much we can do, and we have to do it together. Realization, again, of the investments at port terminals, Lázaro, Veracruz, potentially Altamira, other ports that could be developed. Finally, leverage capabilities of integrated service providers, for instance, co-loading. In our case, for instance, we're doing this with small volume customers. If a truck goes from Mexico City to Merida, and there's not enough volume to complete a truck load, well, there's other brands that we can consolidate with. And then you really take full advantage of the truck capacity, or the available capacity in the market. So that was it on my side. This one is a commercial, sorry for that, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Roberto. Besides having a Plan B, I think some of you better develop Plan Cs and Plan Ds too as you go forward. It's going to be a challenge. Last but certainly not least, in batting cleanup is Alex Meza. He is the Chief Commercial Officer for Jack Cooper Transport and is going to share a few words with us.
Buenos dias. First, I'd like to echo the comments of my colleagues here in congratulating Louis and his team for finally getting around to setting up a conference here in Mexico. I think for those of you who are familiar in the North American Logistics Conference and the global, Mexico in the last 2-3 years just kept, being more present in the programs. And I think in fairness to the growth that everyone has spoken about in Mexico, it was about time, and certainly the turnout here reflects, the interest and the excitement in the global, in the Mexican automotive industry. So with that, so again, congratulations to Luis and his team. The idea that we have here is we're going to present a couple of slides where, from our perspective, we view the Mexican logistics, finished vehicle logistics market as I think everyone is obviously seeing with great deal of opportunities and certainly challenges along the way. So, but before I get into that, and this is not a commercial presentation, as Roberto said, I like to explain just a little bit of who Jack Cooper is, so you know where our perspective is coming from. So, Jack Cooper started a long time ago, 1928. That's in fact Mr. Jack Cooper there in front. They went through 3 generations, and in 2009, the Riggs family acquired the 3rd generation of Mr. Cooper. And, we've had tremendous growth in the last 5 years since 2009. And just to put it in perspective, Mike Riggs, who's the owner, had a company that had 100 trucks in his fleet, and basically through a couple of acquisitions has gotten us to be right now the largest over-the-road finished vehicle logistics in North America. We have a little bit over 3,500 car haulers in our fleet, about a little bit over 2,500 in over the road right now, and it's about 4 million units that we're responsible for transporting in the U.S. and Canada. Over 4,500 employees, and also we've been fortunate to expand our scope of service into more logistics-driven services like yard management, rail loading, unloading, and so on and so forth. So that's how our network looks. And so Canada and the U.S., as you can see, is where we have the strongest presence. Through an acquisition that we did in 2013, we own a company that I think most of you are familiar with, the name Axis, who does also logistics-based services here, and I'll speak just a little bit about it. So 85 locations all in all. This is going from 100 to 3,500 trucks, and in 4 or 5 years has been a roller coaster ride to say the least, but a very productive one. So, and just a quick. Jack Cooper is in Mexico. As I said, we took over Axis and Allied, and we're in a couple of locations, Hermosillo and Cuautitlán as yard managers for Ford, in Monterrey, Guadalajara, and Hermosillo as yard managers for Ferromex, and we also do supply chain management for Jaguar Land Rover, who's not a lot of volume, but it's premium volume, and that certainly offers some complexities into the supply chain. So. That out of the way, and I must admit it did sound like a commercial, so I apologize for that. The way that we wanted to frame just a couple of slides to put things into perspective, is to compare it to the markets where we operate the most, which is the U.S., right? And this is not a comparison to arrive at any conclusion of what market does things better. Is just to pose a couple of different methodologies that different markets use and reemphasize the point that, as supply chains grow, the need for constant evaluation of the supply chains and the best methods and benchmarking is certainly something that, I think it's imperative that the industry, continues to do and do even more with the growth that we're seeing in Mexico. So, just in terms of car sales, the U.S. is about 2014, 16.5 million. Mexico, 1.1 million, which I think Secretary of Economy yesterday admitted that there's a lot of efforts right now being undertaken by the Secretary of Economy and the AMIA, I believe, to help promote the domestic growth. And so I think there's still a lot of potential there, and certainly increasing financing capabilities in Mexico is going to, I think, improve that dynamic tremendously. From a production standpoint, obviously, Mexico 3.3 in 2014, record production, and I think, it's pretty safe to say that from here on to about 2020, every year is going to be a record production year, right? So compared to the 11.6 million in the U.S. of production, as you can see, the parity there is closing the gap, right? So I took copious notes of the by 2020, the market being over 5 million. I mean, that's really impressive. So clearly Mexico, a production-driven market. And so now comparing the two markets, so in the U.S. from a car hauling perspective, we estimate that there are about between 14,000 and 14,500 car haulers in the U.S. And so about 60% of that capacity is with about 10 suppliers, 10 car hauling companies that sort of have 60% of that capacity. And the rest, which is a difference in the way that it's shaped here in Mexico, the rest is smaller companies. There's an owner-operator figure in the States where it's called the man truck model, where there are, in our opinion, maybe a couple of thousand of these smaller companies that sort of rent their capacity, to the market, to consolidators, brokers, and so on and so forth. I think the dynamics in the U.S., there's certainly debates on whether that's enough, whether we need more. Certainly the growth that the U.S. is seeing in sales and production, is an important thing to consider to determine what's the right capacity for the market. And in Mexico, we estimate about 1,800 trucks right now over the road, and it's grown a little bit in the last 2-3 years. I think there's some trailer manufacturers here that I'm sure can speak to this a little bit more coherently than I can. But the question is this enough, right? Is this will this match the demand that the growth on the demand that we're seeing right now in the market? And we don't have the answer. All we see is that it's certainly the growth that it's foreseen in the market is certainly it needs to be considered in order to determine if that's the right level or what is the right level as production continues to grow. And then just the last slide that I have is again in trying to compare different logistics models. So in the U.S., the domestic volume, we estimate that about 80% of the vehicles that are sold in the U.S. Get railed from their origins to a rail ramp, and then from there on, trucks, will deliver the last, anywhere between 100 and 150 miles. Of course, geographically speaking, the U.S. is much more extensive in its territory, so it certainly makes sense that the longer hauls get done by rail, the shorter hauls done by truck. I must say, this is an evolving dynamic right now with certainly some constraints that I think the OEMs and the railroad networks have seen with weather events and with the velocity of the rail. But anyway, right now we feel comfortable saying it's about 80% rail to truck, and 20% of the volume goes directly all truck. Contrasting that to Mexico, all of the I won't say all, but most of the local production that gets delivered to the dealers gets done via car hauler, right? So the hub and spoke model for the domestic production is still not a model that is being, I know it's been tried a couple of times, but for whatever reason, it has not taken off in the way that, that it has. And maybe it has to do with the fact that there's a fair amount of concentration of manufacturing in the center of Mexico, consistent with the demand concentration as well. You know, it's in a radius of about 200 miles, so maybe, you know, those radius or those hinterlands are not prone to do a hub and spoke. But certainly, you know, places to the northwest or to the northeast of Mexico or to the south east of Mexico is certainly something that maybe it's worth considering. The imports, I think they do all, obviously, most of, if not the majority, go via rail from the US and Canada into Mexico. And of course, then we have the imports from the east and the west that I think, for the most part, are gaining a lot more traction in using a hub and spoke concept rather than a truck direct. So I think that's an evolution in my mind of, you know, trying to design the network so the longer hauls get done, you know, via rail and truck on the shorter hauls. And then lastly, just from an export perspective, you know, the U.S., all of what they export, most of what they export to the north and to the south is via rail. Some truck, actually, in the northern plants, Michigan and so on, you know, they do get to cross via truck, but not so much. And then, of course, ocean to the east and west. And in Mexico, you know, of course, the majority right now goes up north via rail, you know, with the inclusion now, not inclusion, but the development or evolution of short sea or maybe not so short sea, you know, events. So, you know, in conclusion, just, you know, for us is with the growth and the challenges that Mexico is going to see in the automotive industry, we just feel the importance of continuously evaluating, you know, the supply chain and the factors, whether infrastructure or capacity. You know, this is an evolving algorithm that needs to be considered on an ongoing basis, just to try to match you know, the supply and demand in terms of capacity. So that's what we have for you today. Thanks for listening, and thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Now for the fun part. You guys get to ask these guys some questions. Anyone out there want to start? I have a few, but I'd rather hear from you guys first. Down there in the back, please. And if you could identify yourself and your company, please.
Morning, I'm Santiago Garcia from Ford Motor Company, and this is for the Nissan and General Motors executives. In your opinion, what are the key elements to consider when introducing or evaluating a new supplier, any carrier or logistics supplier to your supply base?
So I'll take that first. So when we look at a new supplier, we certainly want to look at their infrastructure or their investments they've made to handle our volume. As presented earlier, we're about 25% of the market share in Mexico. We also need to make sure that they're a viable company within Mexico. And then their management staff and the relationships that we have with that supplier.
Right, so for General Motors, it's very similar. We have a similar process that when we look out for direct suppliers, for logistics suppliers, we look at their financial viability, the quality of their processes, we look at the stability of the corporation. So we look at the overall business unit and see, you know, who they supply to and what's their future plans.
Anyone else? Sir?
So I think This is Ivan Hernandez, Daimler. The question is for Scott, Roberto, for everybody. We just hear again and again the capacity issue, right? And we know it's a concerning matter for everybody. Is there already any effort going on in terms of working with the governments in trying to accelerate the need for investment?
So I'm going to back up a little bit. In about 2012, I spoke at a conference in LA. Louis will probably remember that, and led a panel on Mexico. And it was before all of the announcements, or most of the announcement had been made, but the production hadn't been started yet. And so it's a very similar theme that we have today with capacity and infrastructure. And as we move forward with the growth in the industry in the next 2 to 3 years, it's a very similar. So back to your question, Ivan, I think that we would look to our suppliers, so whether it be the railroads or the trucking companies, to work with the local governments. And of course, our corporate office here in Mexico will work with those governmental officials to try to make sure that we have infrastructure, whether it be rail or road systems.
For General Motors, we definitely do work with the government as well. We also rely on, whenever there's private investment required, like on the railroads, we have to work with the railroads to make sure that happens. But we try to provide, look out for our volumes and information so that they're well informed of where we're going in the future. But I think what's missing is somebody that can tell us that somebody's connecting the dots of all the future growth that all of us are expecting to have in our own companies, making sure that the authorities have that information available, and that the investments that are being posed for the expansion of Mexico's infrastructure are going to be there on the right time. I think the speed at which we are growing in Mexico may overwhelm the fast, or the speed that they can actually put the infrastructure for us. So we just got to make sure that we work together towards that same goal of being able to ship our vehicles. Otherwise, for the Mexico government and for the Mexico officials, that will be a detriment to what they want to happen in the future for Mexico exports.
I'll add one more thing to that. The forum that we're in today is a great opportunity because we have so many governmental officials that have spoke, and we get a chance to basically bend their ear and make sure they understand the importance of looking forward, to your point.
Roberto and Alice, can you guys speak maybe to the infrastructure investment that you're looking to find or looking to see in Mexico?
Yeah, so I'll break it into two parts. You know, first, as a foreign company, what do you look, what do you look for in terms of you know, government's assistance to invest? And you know, for us, being a U.S.-based company, of course, there's certain things that always are being played on these cable news channels about security and about, you know, governability and so on. So that's one piece that I think companies just need to do their fair due diligence to understand what's hype and what isn't, and understand, you know, full well what are the opportunities and the challenges when coming in and investing in Mexico. I think you know, for me, sort of being Mexican but also living in the States, you know, what I've found, it's very important to have local knowledge here that's able to, you know, dissipate or help understand what are the major differences between doing business in one and the other. And as far as a domestic investor, I mean, I think, you know, the growth just speaks for itself, right? The opportunity is out there, and you know, whether government can do anything more to promote further investment, yeah, I don't think that's for me to answer, but the opportunity is there.
I'd just like to echo Alex's words on that, and we're always exploring for new opportunities for investments in Mexico. Right now, especially on the terminal side. 4 or 5 years ago, we were very close to be awarded business for investing in the Lázaro Cárdenas Ro-Ro terminal. That didn't materialize in the end, mainly related to the crisis. But again, there's there's probably some opportunities in Altamira that we're currently exploring. So again, we do have the openness, and we're working on it.
Okay.
Yeah, hi, this is Bernardo Lozano, BNSF Railway. This question is for Alfonso. When I saw your slide, Alfonso, regarding the transportation, you put on the rail that there were some vandalism and theft issues, okay? Can you expand a little bit more on that? What type of problems have you had with the rail on that issue? And the other question is, I didn't see that particular item on the trucking. Does that mean that is not an issue on the trucking transportation on that one?
Okay. So for the rail transportation, we're seeing issues where sometimes the rail stops at a specific location for a little bit too long, or there's people actually stopping the full train to vandalize the vehicles. Most of the damages we find, or the missing items we find, is key fobs. That could happen also at origin, or destination. We don't know. There's investigation that has been done, and projects we have conducted together with the railroads to pinpoint those issues and actually try to mitigate them. There's, like Ferromex yesterday mentioned, that they have a big investment, or they spend a lot of money in protecting the railroads, because it is a problem that exists in the country. So in GM, we work with the MUAR, where many of the auto companies are part of, and we're tackling this situation in particular as a combined effort. I'm not sure if that answers the first part of your question. And then on the second part, truck transportation, there's also incidences of violence with truck transportation. They get sometimes stopped and beaten by bad people, right? That want to steal a car. So most of the times they're really well protected with their own systems. Each company has their own way of protecting themselves, GPS and everything that some have presented here in this forum. But it's not as big in volume as it is in rail, perhaps just because of the nature of how many vehicles we're exporting.
Scott, you want to comment?
Sure, I can add to that also. Very similar to GM. We have, if you understand the rail very well in Mexico and the U.S. In the U.S., of course, at interchange points, the rail doesn't set very long. We don't have a lot of this type of damage in the U.S., but in Mexico, it seems like the rail runs fairly slow compared to the U.S. And these handoff points, or yards where the rail gets stopped, has the opportunity for vandalism. And to his point, we certainly see the key fobs and these type of things that can be taken very easily. I don't think they're stealing big pieces of the car, but mostly the smaller pieces.
Anyone else out there? All right, I have one. Mostly this is for Scott and Alfonso, really. The latest figures I've seen, especially for 2013, showed that as far as exports are concerned, about the balance is around 70% rail, 30% ocean right now, from what I've seen. I know it's different for every manufacturer, depending on what models you're making and where the destination for those models are. But when you do your planning for network design, are you looking for a balance now? Do you see that increasing ocean-wise as we go forward in the next couple of years? Can you speak to that maybe a little bit, Scott?
Well, I think if you remember my earlier presentation, I mean, our goal is really the full supply chain is total cost minimization. So we really have to look at every opportunity and compare those opportunities and make a business case out of it. And then that basically builds our decision. We do have to consider capacity within that also.
Now, does that include, my favorite question, inventory carrying costs too?
Yes.
Does that come into consideration?
Yes.
So there's a big difference between when it comes to rail and ocean, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Alfonso?
I would repeat the same comments. I mean, we look at the total cost, and decide based upon that how to move our vehicles.
All right, I got one for the logistics guys. Alex and Roberto, we've heard a lot of talk about co-loading, especially in the U.S. in the last few years. What's it going to take to get some more cooperation down this way, as far as if you want to talk co-loading or vessel sharing agreements, whatever they need to get better utilization of what we have now, because we don't see a lot of more capacity coming online anytime soon?
So your question, just to clarify then, the co-loading on the rail side or just generally
speaking?
Well,
on rail or ocean specifically, and when you're looking at the exports, because that seems to be the challenge right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think for on the ocean side, the co-loading is just a fact, right? My mind, and of course Roberto here should speak, but I don't see any issues necessarily on that. For the little I know on the rail side, that there's been certainly some systems-driven constraints in terms of the bills of lading and how those export documentations are requested when crossing the border, which it sounds to me, if that is in fact the case, then it should be a solvable issue. But I'll speak to what I know, which is the trucks. And in the U.S., co-loading is more a fact of life than what I've seen here in Mexico, at least on the car hauling side, especially on the VDCs where they're multi-brands. I think the position that we've seen from our customers is, look, you figure out how to make your loads and how best to utilize your equipment. And if there's a GM mixed with a Ford, mixed with a Mercedes, so long as you deliver it on the times that we require and the conditions that we require, it's just a play on making assets be fully utilized. So I think in Mexico, I don't see that as much. There's some consolidation centers here where I think they're starting to do that more, but certainly an area of opportunity in terms of asset utilization, increasing just capacity from that standpoint.
Scott?
Right. Yeah, I'll make one comment to add to what Alex said. Certainly in Canada, the Canadian National and the Canadian Pacific Railroad have done co-loading for years, and we co-load there. In Mexico, we would definitely want to co-load if we could. I think that, to your point, IT infrastructure is the biggest issue, and the border exchanges, customs, and all of that goes along with it is the biggest. So it's going to take the railroads and their IT staff to figure out solutions to make that work.
Yeah, just as Alex said, on the ocean side, on the ocean transportation side, it is a fact. On the trucking side, it's definitely growing. We've been doing it for a couple of years now, especially with those with those brands with low selling volumes in some regions of the country, where it makes total sense to just consolidate with different brands. I think it's definitely growing, mainly on those mixing centers, and so far we haven't really seen like big systems issues, at least for those small volumes.
Alfonso, any comment?
I mean, there's opportunity definitely to do that in Mexico. I think the U.S. does it, and it's working well, especially because we own our VDCs in the U.S. I think the railroads own the VDCs, so there's a difference there. We would have to probably find a common ground on a VDC that is commonly owned, and maybe for domestic distribution that could work. For export, I share the same experience as Scott mentioned.
Is there any of that going on right now? Do you have anybody trucking into your VTCs to take advantage of your, do you have excess capacities at your VTCs?
We don't have right now, but we're not working on that project currently. I think there's opportunity to do that.
Let's talk about short sea a little bit. I'll stay with Roberto, because we had a conversation about this yesterday, and Alex was there too. And from my ocean background, I don't really consider it to be short sea because short sea model is what it does in Europe. This is more what we call it almost short sea, but it's it's days. It's measured in days, not hours. And to do that, as you said, is a big commitment using your larger ships from a cost standpoint, right? To bring those larger ships in. Will we see more vessel sharing agreements between the carriers? I know there's been problems, and we spoke about this yesterday. There's been antitrust issues going on in the U.S. and Europe and Japan. But will we see more of this as we go? Because as the OEMs require more frequency and less transit times?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think when we've seen vessel sharing agreements, being necessary and working is when there's, when there's lack of capacity for a certain trade.
Mm-hmm.
We currently don't see a lack of capacity on the, for instance, short sea North America trade. There is the capacity. There's just, it just doesn't work the same way as it does in other places in the world, right? Like intra-Europe or intra-Asia. So it's more about, in our mind, just having the critical mass to commit to a reliable, competitive service, and also, just for the OEMs to plan that it's going to be a longer transit time that they currently experience in other places in the world.
Scott and Alfonso, do you see, from an ocean standpoint, the right capacity at the right time right now? Or because I keep on going back to the OEMs always put out their own tenders, right, on their own basis. Is there been talk within the OEMs about maybe doing something together where you could then get better frequency and better transit times?
I'm not involved in any conversations with other OEMs for that. But let's talk just a little bit about short sea and what I would like to add to your earlier point about carrying cost. So if you consider where our plants are located, it's a pretty good dray from Aguas Calientes to potentially Veracruz, and you heard the API talk about Veracruz and the issues with the El Norte winds and other issues there. And so when we look at the total cost and we look at the carrying cost through the network, it's a tough sell. I think also too, the way that the manufacturers recognize wholesale or revenue recognition, rail is a little bit more, it's quicker because as soon as we cross the border, it recognizes the revenue.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, for us, we haven't also worked with anybody else. We're just providing the information to the ocean carriers, and they program their frequencies, and that's what it's on the contract right now. So.
Yeah, just adding to that comment, yeah, normally what happens is that the purchasing of this service is part of a global bid, right, where you have all of your trades, and then that includes the, for instance, Mexico to North America trade.
Any more questions from the audience? Just one last one from me, and we'll wrap up. Going into 2015 and beyond, if you could change one thing in Mexico logistics, what would it be and why? And Scott, I'm going to put you on the hot seat first. Yeah, well, you're closest to me.
What would I change?
That'll give the other guys time to think about their answers, too.
I think the infrastructure and capacity is really the biggest thing that we really talk about all the time. Can we handle the extra volume through the network? Probably that would be it.
I'm trying to think of a more creative answer, but I think it's the right one. I mean, it's what concerns us, right? It's what keeps us up at night. So I'll go with the same answer.
So capacity, 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 right? Roberto?
Yeah, I'd like to echo your words, and also I think it's a very important point what you made, Scott, related to the total cost. Sometimes it's not so easy to calculate or to really see it. Sometimes decisions are made just based out of a just looking at some portion of the supply chain, just that single component. But sometimes it's just not so easy to evaluate what's the impact further down in the logistics chain. So I think that would be my comment.
Thank you. Alex?
Yeah, for me, it's almost a softball coming from the transportation side, right? As I'm sure most of you know, that's still a protected market where only Mexican nationals can invest in. And you know, there's a couple of figures there. I think they're making a little bit of progress in trying to relax that, but you know, certainly. You know, that, if it was on my Santa's wish list, that, you know, the ease of investment into this sector would be, you know, one that I think would be at the top of a lot of people. Maybe not so much the Mexican carriers, which I thoroughly understand, but for us as an international company, you know, the ease of, you know, investing in sectors openly is certainly a big one for us.
Well, it's going to be an interesting time, so we'll see what happens and when we talk about it next year when we come back. So one housekeeping note, we're going right from here to lunch, and then we'll be back in this room at 1:30 p.m. We have a couple of very important speakers from the Mexican government that are going to be here. Please give us our panelists a big hand. Thank you.